Good morning, or depending on when you're watching this, good afternoon, good evening, or good night. My name's Ross, and as always, told out of Voice of Radio. So today we need to take a little bit of a look at the complete history of Breakthrough. I know a lot of people like the complete history series. We haven't had an episode for a little while now, but we are back. We're talking about Breakthrough, and Breakthrough was a very cool set. Usual rules, if you want more of these videos, and we will finish it eventually, I promise you we will, but if you want these a bit more regularly, do tell your friends, get those views up, and then it'll, incentivize me to do them a little bit more regularly. But I needed to make some videos to upload while the World Championships was happening. This seemed like a good one to do. So Breakthrough came out in Japan on September the 26th, 2015, and then followed along in November the 4th, 2015 in English. So it was our November set, and this was the set where Break Pokémon came in. That was kind of the whole point of the set. Make no mistake about it, this was the Break set, the set that brought us all of those lovely Break Pokémon. There was only really one in this set that was good, but Break Pokémon were a staple for a few sets, and that was very, very cool. And we might as well honestly start with them. So in terms of breaks, we had Chestnut Break, and this will show you what they were. They were half cards. You could not play them by themselves. They had to go on top of existing cards. But you would keep all the attacks and abilities of the previous card, and anything on the bottom half, the weakness, resistance, retreat cost, etc. But you would gain extra HP, and you would gain one attack or ability. So Chestnut Break, you gain the attack Tough Hammer that did 160 plus 30 to itself and 30 to one of your opponent's bench. It wasn't particularly good, if I'm honest with you. I am sorry. We also said hello to Raichu Break that for free energy could deal 170, discarding all energy, which was interesting but not particularly good. We saw Marowak Break that did 20 damage plus 40 more for each prize card your opponent had taken for 2 energy. Still not particularly good. We saw Florges Break that actually gained the ability Floral Breeze that let you heal 30 damage and remove a special condition from your active. This was a break on a stage 2 and still only had 140 HP, so you can draw your own conclusion on that one. We got Noivern Break that for free energy did 70 damage, but 150 if you could match hand sizes with your opponent. But it was the Darkness type Pokemon Break that was the best of them. It was Zoroark Break. Now, it was on a stage 1. And remember, this was an extra evolution. You couldn't just rare candy from a basic to a break. You had to go basic stage 1 break. But for a single energy, you got to copy one of your opponent's active Pokemon's attacks. And it doesn't say you need to have the necessary energy, which means you didn't need to have the necessary energy. And it was a very good card. It also helps that Zoroark as a whole was pretty good and saw play. Zoroark Break was really, really good, and we loved it. And they were the breaks that you got in the first set, and I'll be honest with you, like I said, only one of them was actually good, but it was very, very good. The other new thing we saw in this particular set was we got a couple of weird secret rare Mewtwo. These were the kind of cards, these were a new type of secret rare. They were drawn by the lovely Mitsuhiro Arita, who by now we know is just an absolute master of their craft, and they had a whole bunch of different Pokemon on them. This was different to what we had seen in the past. In previous sets, we hadn't seen these kind of secret rares. They were very much new in this particular set, and they were absolutely beautiful. And one of them was really, really good. We'll get there in a minute. Now, there were a bunch of new EXs and Mega EXs in the set, and the good news is there was no mucking around. All of the EXs had a full art, and all of the Mega EXs had a secret rare version as well, which was lovely. So you had Houndoom, that was actually quite a good card, we'll get there in a minute, and then you had Mega Houndoom to go along with it. You had Glaily EX with the full art that wasn't particularly great, but then you had Mega Glaily EX that we'll talk about a bit later. That is a very good card. And then we had 2 pairs of Mewtwo. So we had the bad Mewtwo that came in with a full art card as well, and then the good Mewtwo that really was a very good Mewtwo. And remember, I've popped them up on the screen here as well as I'm talking. Remember, there was the secret rare version, so there were actually 3 versions of each of these Mewtwo, although like I've said, one was better than the other. We then had Mega Mewtwo X, 4 energy, but it was a mixture of fighting and psychic, 150, but if it's a stadium in play, 200 damage, and it's not affected by any other effects. Seems good on paper, but it was just way too expensive, no one ever used it. But Mega Mewtwo Y was redonk, because for 2 energy you did 10 damage base, plus 30 more for each energy attached to both active Pokemon, and basically that added up very, very quickly indeed. But we'll talk more about that in a moment. Now, in terms of full art supporters, there were 2. We had full art versions of both Bridgette and Giovanni's scheme, both of which were new supporters in the set that were actually pretty good and did see a bunch of play. No other gold cards, unfortunately. Your pre-release promo was the Chestnut from the set. The good news is it had alternate art. The bad news is it was the Chestnut from the set. This was not a card that really made any kind of dent whatsoever. For that, ladies and gentlemen, I can only apologise. In terms of the most expensive card in the set, it shouldn't really surprise you to learn that it is one of those fancy Mewtwo, but as I've said in this video and we'll say again later, these Mewtwo were not created equal. The damage change Mewtwo is way better, so it is the most expensive card in the set, and it generally comes in at somewhere in the region of about $90 to $100-ish. And then, as we tended to do, we got ourselves a couple of theme decks as well. We got Burning Spark and Night Striker. So Burning Spark was your Raichu theme deck, which did obviously feature, shockingly enough, the Raichu. You got yourself a holo and a non-holo Raichu, and it was a cracked, what we call a cracked ice holo Raichu that was exclusive to the deck. And then you got yourself non-holo rares of Smeargle, Dodrio, and Magnezone. Worth pointing out that Magnezone was a holo in the set, so the non-holo was exclusive. Shout out to the rather nice Mega Mewtwo Y coin. Because the other deck had a Mega Mewtwo X coin. It was Night Striker. And what we had here was the Noivern deck. You'll notice both of these decks were Pokemon that had breaks in the set, though the breaks were not in the theme decks. And you had yourself a lovely cracked ice holo version of Noivern, which was obviously exclusive to the deck. All the cracked ice holos were. Shout out, I should say, to Bulbapedia for helping me out with some of this information. And then we had non-holo rares of Zoroark that was really good, and that was a holo in the set, so it was exclusive. Cresselia and Gengar, and again, the non-holo Gengar was exclusive, so honestly, this one giving you the Zoroark and a version that wasn't anywhere else was extremely cool. Now, in terms of the best cards in the set, we need to start off with Mamoswine. There was a Mamoswine in the set, and anytime there's a Mamoswine, I get very happy. Wasn't particularly great, I'm afraid. It reduced damage done by 30 from fire and water Pokemon, and then if there was a stadium in play, you did 120. If your opponent had a stadium in play, you did 80, healed 40. It was way too expensive, but there was a new Mamoswine, and that's always worth celebrating. But there was also an Octillery, and Octillery was nuts. Octillery saw a huge amount of play in a huge amount of decks, and all it was a stage 1 that once during your turn let you draw until you had 5 cards in your hand. And honestly, ladies and gentlemen, that was enough. Just drawing till you had 5 cards in your hand was just enough to make this a really very good card. Although it is worth noting that Archie's Ace in the Hole being legal at the time did make a pretty huge difference, because that was a supporter card that just let you flat out play it from the discard to the bench as if it was some kind of basic Pokemon. Oh, that made a difference, ladies and gentlemen. That absolutely made a difference. And we also had the aforementioned Mega Mewtwo Y. Now, I mentioned the attack that for 2 energy can deal 30 for each energy attached to both active Pokemon. Shout out to Mega Turbo, which of course let you accelerate extra energy from the discard, which is a pretty big deal. But the really awesome thing about Mega Mewtwo EX was Mewtwo EX. Because that, for free energy, had the attack damage change that let you switch all damage counters on this Pokemon with all the damage counters on your opponent's active Pokemon. And then you would play this with the Stadium card Shrine of Memories, which would then let you use that attack, even though you were using the Mega EX. You could use the attacks of pre-evolution Pokemon. And this was ridiculous, because if your opponent did damage but didn't KO you, you just swap it straight back over to them. And that would be hilarious. So what your opponent would want to do is just not deal a huge amount of damage, wait until they could try and get a big KO, but you had Psychic Infinity that could start doing decent damage very quickly, so they wouldn't be able to take turn after turn setting up a big KO, or Psychic Infinity would hurt them. But if they tried, 2-hit KOing you, damage change would stop them. It was, I can say this with a lot of confidence, one of the worst decks I ever played against, and I hated it with a passion. Now, Glade was a very good card, and in the same way Octillery used Archie, this used Maxi. The ability Premonition let you look at the top 5 cards of your deck and put them back in any order. Yes, there were people that combined this with Octillery. Yes, it made a brilliant combo with Octillery. Essentially, if you could only draw 1 or 2 of Octillery, Glade makes sure you drew the right ones. And then for 2 energy, you did 130 if you played a supporter card for a double colorless energy, bearing in mind that hit a very good weakness against stuff like, Darkrai. And yeah, this was not bad, ladies and gentlemen. This was not bad at all. This got teched into an awful lot of decks, and I think we can all understand why. Now, I mentioned Zoroark Break earlier, and that was a very good card letting you copy attacks for a single energy, but the Zoroark in this set was nuts. The ability Stand-In let you just jump into the active, which was brilliant, but remember this set reprinted Floatstone, and this would get free retreat with Floatstone, so you could jump into the active, use Floatstone to free retreat, and it meant you could never be stuck in the active or worried about special conditions or any of that, because you could just get around them super easily. Plus, Mindjack did 10 damage base plus 30 more for each of your opponent's bench. That's 160 if they've got a full bench. That is a lot. And that adds up really, really quickly. This was a card that saw a huge amount of play as a single prize Pokemon. It was great. Now, Xerneas was also pretty good. It had the Rainbow Force attack, 10 damage base plus 30 more for each different type of Pokemon on your bench. This would be better in a couple of sets' time when we were introduced to dual-type Pokemon, especially Volcanion. It was basic and 2 different typings. But make no mistake about it, this was a very good card. The problem with it was, and it did see a bunch of success here and there, but one of the big problems we saw was the fact that you didn't really have much good energy acceleration, so it basically took 2 turns to actually build it up, and you didn't always have time to actually pull that off. But not to be outdone, Evil Tal was very, very good as well. The ability Fright Night said as long as it was active, each Pokemon tool card in play had no effect. And this, there was a lot of good things you could do, but it was particularly hilarious with stuff like Fighting Fury Belt, which gave you an extra 40 HP. But of course, what you would generally do here was do enough damage to, KO them. But they're saved by Fighting Fury Belt. Except they're not saved by Fighting Fury Belt, because you get a KO when you turn off the belt, and then it's still your turn, you just get a mid-turn KO. But also for free energy, 60 to the active, 60 to a benched EX, this would build up very, very quickly indeed. This could absolutely wreck some decks. This could take multiple prizes, this could hunt down stuff on the bench that should have been safe, etc., etc. I saw a stream at one point. I was streaming I want to say German Nationals, and there was a US stream going on the same weekend. So obviously we finish our stream, official stream, and then go watch the official US stream. And I remember a game against Primal Groudon where you couldn't gust up Primal Groudon because of its ancient trait, so the player just attacked with this. And even though they couldn't gust up Primal Groudon, they just got it by the time it got active, it was already KO'd, and that was a big problem. Also have to give a shout out to Mr. Mime with its bench barrier ability, protecting your bench. That is a very good thing. And of course, nice little irony here that you would be protecting your bench from stuff like Evil Tal, which was always very, very nice. Now, Mega Glaily was briefly a very interesting card that people had a little bit of success with. For free energy, it did 100 damage, but if you had 10 or more damage counters, it did 250, which was Mega X KOing territory. People played around with it. It was fun. It saw a bit of success here and there. It top cut a few things, but it was never particularly great. Empoleon was another card that saw some play with Archie because it gave your basic Pokemon, well, it let them do an extra 20 damage, which was extremely cool. But it was another one that, it was a nice little tech here and there, but it wasn't exactly some card that had some huge impact on the metagame or anything along those lines. It was fine, but it wasn't as good as we thought it might be. Now, Houndoomy X ended up being a very interesting card. For 1 energy, you discarded the top 2 cards of your opponent's deck. And that was actually pretty decent milling. The Mega for 2 energy could deal 160, which was a nice attack if you were playing Houndoomy X. This was another one of those that really didn't set the competitive landscape on fire like that, but you would see people top-cutting tournaments here and there with it, and that was fun. Now, Magnus X was a fun card, let you accelerate as much lightning energy as you liked during your turn, and one of the best partners here was Raikou, reduced damage done to it by 20, but also dealt 50 base plus 20 more for each lightning energy on it. Another deck that was hyped more than it was really successful, but it was still a cool card that we liked quite a bit. And I've got to give a shout out to Typhlosion. It was a little bit of a meme deck, but for 1 energy, you discarded the top 5 cards of your deck and did 80 for each energy card you discarded. There were times where this worked, and it was absolutely beautiful. Now, in terms of trainer cards, there were a bunch of reprints in this set that were pretty good, but there were also some good new cards, like Bridgette. Now, when Bridgette was printed, it was a good card. You never wanted to search for 1 basic EX, but 3 basic non-EX Pokemon. In single prize decks, this was a staple. It was phenomenal for setting up. But it did actually get better a few years later, because what happened was we got GXs printed, some of which were basic, and Bridgette would let you search for 3 basic GXs, which became a little bit of a problem for your opponent. Giovanni's Scheme was a very nice card that let you either draw till you had 5 cards in your hand or do an extra 20 damage. Both of those could be good under the right circumstances. Judge wasn't a new card per se, but it was printed for the first time in a very long time. And we all know Judge. Both players shove a hand into their deck, draw 4 cards. Very, very nice card indeed. Town Map was a card that a very prominent world champion played in every deck pretty much when it was legal. Let you turn all your prize cards face up so you always drew into what you wanted from your prizes. That was kind of awesome. And Parallel City was legit nuts. And I probably should have mentioned this earlier as the first 2-sided stadium. I'm mentioning it now. And it would affect both halves of the table differently. So you would choose which side affected you and which side affected your opponent. And one side would reduce damage from grass, fire, and water Pokemon by 20. The other side would have their bench limited to 3 Pokemon. And this was generally why it was played. You would use it to put your opponent down to a 3 Pokemon bench, which was very, very annoying. Very good card, saw a huge amount of play. And then in terms of the best decks that came out of the set, this wasn't necessarily a set that gave us lots of amazing decks. A lot of the best cards in the set were things like Zoroark, Octillery, Glade, Bridgette, Town Map, things of that nature. Cards that weren't necessarily decks, but made a big difference in a bunch of decks. But there were 3 or 4, depending how you look at it, that made a big impact. I've already mentioned Mega Mewtwo Y. Ridiculous card. Mega Mewtwo Y was amazing. You would have to use Mega Turbo to get the extra energy on. Houndoomy X was a very important card because it let you search out both your, it let you search out your EXs, which was a very big deal. And then, of course, You would also really be relying on Shrine of Memories. That was an absolutely crucial card. And a lot of the time, this was a very straightforward deck where you would just be smashing and then your opponent would hit you and you just damage swap. But I hated it so much. I should give a shout out to the lovely Scott Simmons, a very lovely person indeed, who did get third place at the European Challenge Cup with this deck. That was one of its first big accomplishments. Now, Yveltal Zoroark Glade was another deck that kind of came around, and this deck really is what it looks like on the face of it. It is a deck that uses Yveltal Zoroark and Glade, acknowledging that you can do all of that with just double colorless and darkness energy, to hit really good damage with single prize Pokemon. Ryan Morehouse took top 16 at the ECC with this, and Jordan Palmer, one of the best players in Australia, did win the last ever Australian Nationals with this deck, but it didn't play Glade, but it did play Yveltal EX. So it was more of an Yveltal EX with Yveltal and Zoroark deck. That's why I said there's 3 or 4 good decks coming from this set. It really depends on whether you count Yveltal Zoroark Glade as a different tech to Yveltal Zoroark Yveltal EX. I will let you be the judge. And then the aforementioned Rainbow Road. It wasn't a good deck yet, but it would be. When this set came out, it really wasn't all that good. But in time, we would get Xerneas Break, which gave it a bunch of extra HP, which was very, very nice. And then you would also get your dual-type Pokemon, most notably Volcanion. And then you could really get a lot of Pokemon sitting there on the bench with, you know, a lot of different typings with not that many cards. When you had all your dual types, things got very, very interesting indeed. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, that was Breakthrough, a very nice set for lots of reasons, but if nothing else, it was the first Break set, and I like that. Although in a lot of European countries, it wasn't Break, it was Turbo, and that is a way better thing. Raichu Turbo, Yveltal Turbo, that's what I'm talking about. So there we go, ladies and gentlemen, but now it's over to you guys. Tell me what you thought about Breakthrough. If you were playing at the time, tell me your memories. If you weren't playing at the time, tell me your thoughts now that you've seen it. Go nuts in the comment section, but be nice! And then make sure you like this video, subscribe to this channel, follow me on Twitter at the Wasi. That's where we talk Pokemon and a bunch of other card games and other non-card Pokemon games, all kinds of fun things. And do please consider checking out patreon.com/PTCGRadio, where you can support the channel, get some bonus podcasts, join a Discord where we chat Pokemon, all kinds of fun things. But by far, the most important thing as always, look after yourselves till next time, would ya? Thank you very much for watching. My name's Ross, and you've been watching PTCG Radio.